My name is Eudoria Keene, and I turned 70 last spring. I've always believed peace could be cooked into a meal slow, patient, careful with the heat. That Sunday, I baked my daughter Vespera's favorite green chili casserole, layered with extra cheese the way she liked it when she was little. The kitchen smelled of roasted peppers and soap. I told myself that if dinner went well, maybe the tension between us would finally ease. Vespera arrived first, perfume sharp enough to sting my eyes. Her husband, Damon, followed, polite but distracted, already scrolling through his phone. And then came Hortensia Lowell, his mother, her bracelets jangling like little alarms. She gave me the kind of smile people use when they're about to insult you but haven't decided how. We sat at the table under the humming ceiling fan. Conversation was brittle but manageable until I mentioned the leaky kitchen faucet. More to fill the silence than anything. "I'll call someone this week," I said lightly. Vespera's fork stopped mid-air. "You mean my faucet? In my house," she said. Her voice was low, dangerous. I started to explain that the repair bill could come from my savings, an old habit, trying to make things easier. But Hortensia chuckled softly, and that sound broke something. Vespera stood, chair scraping the tile. "You just can't help yourself. Can you?" she hissed. Her hand came fast, the first slap so loud the dog barked outside, then another, and another. I didn't move. 15 times her palm met my face. 15 times her ring caught my skin. Damon froze, eyes wide, but said nothing. Hortensia laughed an ugly, delighted laugh as if she were watching theater. When it was over, the room felt hollow. The air used up. I could smell blood and metal, and the casserole cooling untouched between us. I didn't cry. I gathered the napkins from the floor, folded them carefully, and walked to my bedroom at the end of the hall. My cheek throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Behind me, laughter floated from the dining room, light and mean. She forgot whose name was still written on those walls. The house went silent once the laughter faded. I locked my bedroom door, though I doubted anyone would bother coming after me. The mirror above the dresser showed a stranger, one cheek swollen purple, hair clinging damply to my face. I pressed a towel wrapped around ice against the skin and watched water drip down my wrist, darkening the sleeve of my blouse. The sting was sharp, but the quiet after it felt almost merciful. Outside the window, Santa Fe's night hummed with crickets and faraway traffic. The house, once warm with my husband's laughter, now felt like a borrowed shell. My gaze drifted to the top drawer of the dresser, a drawer I hadn't opened in years. I knew what waited inside a thin folder, cream-colored and heavy with the weight of trust. When I unfolded the deed, the paper crackled like brittle leaves. Eudoria May Keene. My name stood alone on the line for legal owner. Vespera's had never been added. No matter how many times she said we'd take care of that later. Years ago, she'd promised it was just to help with property taxes, that it would make things simpler. I'd believed her. I ran a fingertip over the ink, the curve of each letter. My reflection shimmered faintly in the window glass. Tired, lined, but alive. Something inside me settled, not with anger, but with clarity. I realized I didn't need to shout or fight. I only needed to remember what was already mine. I laid the deed beside my handbag and began to gather what I would need: my phone, the small camera I used for painting references, a folder of medical receipts, my list of prescriptions, proof of age, health, injury. I took photos of my face, close enough to catch the redness where her ring had split the skin. When I finally turned off the lamp, the room filled with soft blue light from the street. I could still hear the faint echo of their laughter through the walls, but it no longer pierced. I placed the folder at the edge of my nightstand, hand resting on it as though it were a pulse. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, only that I would do it quietly. And I would not stop. Halfway. Morning came thin and gray, the kind of light that makes every sound feel louder. I dressed carefully, choosing a plain navy dress and the cardigan with deep pockets. The bruises on my cheek had darkened overnight, spreading toward my jaw like spilled ink. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, not to hide, just to contain the story until I decided where to tell it. The Santa Fe Legal Aid Center sat on a quiet street near the old plaza, a low adobe building that smelled faintly of paper and coffee. I waited in the lobby beside women half my age, each clutching envelopes of documents and exhaustion. When my name was called, I met Quentin Mabry, a retired attorney with kind eyes behind thick glasses and hands that looked steady enough to hold other people's chaos. He listened without interrupting, only nodding once when I showed him the photos of my face. "We'll start here," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You're still the legal owner of that property. No transfer ever finalized." He tapped the deed, his voice calm but certain. "You have every right to decide what happens next." The words didn't feel like vengeance. They felt like permission. Together, we filled out the paperwork for an emergency protective order. He guided me through each line, dates, addresses, the brief description of what had happened. My pen moved slowly, deliberate as brushstrokes. I'd painted portraits all my life, but I had never drawn a line this straight. When the forms were done, he made copies for the courthouse and the police station. "The order can be issued within 24 hours, he said. "Once that's active, you'll be protected from any contact." After that, he paused, studying me. "You mentioned you might want to sell." I nodded. "We can do it quietly," Quentin continued. "A discreet cash buyer, a notary, I trust. Police can stand by when you collect your personal items. You won't have to face her again." The practical language steadied me. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, warm against the scarf, still hiding the bruise. I stepped into the light, the folder tucked under my arm, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Cool and precise as paper, pressed under glass. By early afternoon, Quentin had already made a call. His efficiency surprised me, though he carried it like routine paperwork and mercy, both handled with steady hands. He drove me himself to the title office, a beige building tucked between a gallery and a coffee shop. Santa Fe sun poured through the windows, bleaching every color to pale gold. Inside, the air smelled of toner and dust. A young clerk offered water in a paper cup before ushering us into a small conference room. On the table lay a thin stack of documents, each one clipped neatly, each one heavier than it looked. "The buyers are local," Quentin said softly. "The Rosarios. They've done cash closings before. It's clean and quick." When the couple entered, they carried the calm confidence of people who build things for a living, he with work-worn hands, she with quiet eyes that lingered, respectful, but curious. They introduced themselves, their voices careful. I sensed they knew more of the situation than they said aloud. "We love older properties," Mrs. Rosario said gently. "They just need someone to take care of them again." I smiled faintly, not trusting my throat to answer. The title clerk reviewed each page, explaining how the funds would be wired within 24 hours, how the protective order allowed the locks to be changed immediately. Her voice was practiced, precise. Every word struck clean against the hum of the ceiling vent. When she passed me the pen, my hand trembled. The bruise along my wrist darkened beneath the light, an uninvited signature of its own. I steadied my grip, pressing the pen tip to the paper. The first stroke caught slightly, then slid smooth, black ink spreading over my name. Eudoria May Keene. The letters looked foreign, as if belonging to someone braver. The clerk smiled. "That's it. Once the notary stamp dries, You're free to go. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering leaves across the sidewalk. I waited while Quentin exchanged final words with the Rosarios, their tones courteous, final, standing there. I rubbed my thumb against the faint residue of ink on my skin. It felt cool, cleaner than the ache beneath it. Ink, I thought, is colder than anger, but far more permanent. The movers finished just before sunset. The last of the furniture, most of it already sold with the house, was loaded into the Rosario's truck. A police cruiser idled at the curb, its lights off, but presence firm. Quentin stood near the porch steps, coat folded over his arm, watching everything with quiet precision. Inside, I walked through each room one final time. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and dust, stripped of memory. In the kitchen, sunlight cut across the counter where a small, pale mark still showed the burn from the night I taught Vespera to cook. I brushed my fingers over it, then let my hand fall. At 4:30, tires crunched on the gravel drive. The sound hit my chest before I even turned. Through the front window, I saw Vespera's car pulling in fast, Hortensia in the passenger seat, both stepping out as if storming a battlefield. Their heels struck the pavement with precision. The door handle rattled first. Then came the knocking. Hard. Angry. I opened it just enough for the light to fall between us. "What is this?" Vespera demanded, eyes wide at the sight of boxes being carried out. "Why are strangers in my house?" "It's not your house," I said quietly. It never was. Hortensia pushed forward, perfume thick and sharp. "You can't do this. You senile old woman. We'll sue. You've committed fraud." Behind her, the police officer stepped from the cruiser, hand resting near his belt, calm but unmistakably alert. Quentin handed him the protective order. "The sale is legal. The property transfer has been recorded." Vespera's face changed, rage twisting into disbelief. "You can't sell my house," she screamed, voice cracking. I looked at her without flinching. "You can't sell what you never owned." For a moment, no one moved. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, and the sound of the moving truck door slamming echoed down the street like a final punctuation. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you'll need to leave the property now. You're in violation of a protective order." Hortensia sputtered something about injustice, but the officer's gaze ended the argument. They turned back toward their car. Muttering, I stepped outside, walking past them down the path, the gravel shifting beneath my shoes. I didn't look back. The house stood behind me empty, waiting for a new beginning that no longer needed me in it. Delphine Carr opened her door before I even knocked. She was the kind of woman who always knew when someone needed soup, silence, or both. Her apartment smelled of sage and bread, its walls lined with small watercolor landscapes she painted. After her husband passed, "Spare rooms ready," she said simply, taking my coat before I could refuse. "No questions tonight." I nodded, too tired to explain the noise still ringing in my head, the sound of doors closing. Police radios. My daughter's last shout fading behind me. Delphine warmed leftover stew, and I ate slowly while she folded laundry in the same room, pretending not to watch me. When I finally checked my phone, the screen lit like a wound. Dozens of messages waited, Vespera's voice notes swinging between fury and apology, Hortensia's accusations about inheritance and betrayal, Damon's single half-hearted text, "Maybe you went too far." I blocked them all. The silence that followed was absolute. Outside, Santa Fe's evening deepened into indigo. Through the thin curtains, I could see the faint glow of the mountains beyond the city lights. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for anyone else's comfort. The realization landed both heavy and light, like the first deep breath after a long illness. News traveled faster than I expected. The next morning, Delphine's neighbor stopped her in the hallway. Something about that teacher who sold her house overnight, I heard them whisper. The curiosity edged with admiration or judgment. It was hard to tell which. By noon, Quentin called to confirm the funds had cleared and were safely deposited. He sounded almost proud. I thanked him, though the gratitude caught in my throat. The money didn't feel like victory. It felt like ballast, something to keep me steady until I could stand on my own again. That night, after Delphine went to bed, I sat by her window with my journal. My handwriting trembled, uneven, but clear. I wrote only one line before closing it again. Some things you lose with grief, others you lose with relief. The page absorbed the words quietly, as if it understood both kinds of loss. 2 weeks later, I moved into a small adobe casita at the edge of Santa Fe, where the desert stretched wide and unbothered. The land breathed differently there, slow, honest, without expectation. My new front door came with 2 small brass keys, both slightly tarnished, which I kept on a string instead of a ring. The sound they made, soft and certain, felt like ownership of my own silence. The mornings were bright but cool, the air scented with sage and dry earth. I unpacked slowly, placing only what mattered: my easel by the window, a kettle on the stove, a photo of my late husband tucked on the shelf beside a small cactus. Everything else could wait. Delphine helped me find a volunteer spot at the public library, where they ran an art program for seniors. My first morning there, I handed out brushes and paper to a dozen shaky but eager hands. Watching them paint their strokes uneven but full of life, I felt something loosen inside me. When one woman asked if I painted too, I smiled and promised I'd start again soon. That promise became real a few days later, when I walked downtown and bought a new set of brushes. Soft as breath, that night, I painted the sunrise as it spilled over the mesa's gentle pink, giving way to gold. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Annika Mirek, the counselor Quentin had mentioned, met me once a week at a sunlit office that smelled faintly of lavender. She never asked for details I didn't offer. Instead, she spoke of boundaries, recovery, and the quiet work of forgiving yourself for staying too long. I donated a portion of the sale money to the local shelter for women rebuilding their lives. It felt like setting something right in the world, even if it couldn't rewrite the past. One evening, a stray golden dog wandered into my yard, ribs showing, eyes curious but kind. I knelt and whispered, "You look like copper in this light." He wagged his tail once, as if agreeing to stay. It was Quentin who called first, his voice cautious. "She wants to see you. Eudoria. Says she just wants to talk." I agreed to meet in a small cafe near the plaza, the kind with chipped mugs and soft jazz leaking from an old speaker. I arrived early, choosing a seat by the window where I could see both the square and the horizon beyond it. Copper waited at home, asleep in his basket. I told myself this was just another errand, nothing more. When Vespera walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung limp. The sharp confidence she wore like armor had cracked. She hesitated before sitting, eyes red-rimmed, fingers restless around the edge of her cup. Hortensia stopped answering my calls. She began, voice flat. "Damon left. He says he can't live inside chaos." Her laugh came short and bitter. "Guess he finally meant mine." I said nothing, letting the silence find its shape. "I just want my life back." "Mother," she said finally. "The house, the money, something. I can't start over from nothing." I looked at her. Really looked at her. The daughter I had raised to believe that love always rescued her, even when she broke what couldn't be fixed. "You can start over," I said quietly. "Just not with what isn't yours. If you need a reference for work, I'll write it. If you want therapy, I'll help you find someone. But there won't be money. There won't be a house. Those things end here. Her jaw tightened. A flash of the old defiance returning. You're heartless. I stirred the tea slowly, watching the swirl fade into stillness. No, I said. Just finally, honest. The chair scraped hard against the tile as she stood. Eyes burning. She muttered something I couldn't hear and left, the cafe door slamming behind her. I sat for a while longer, hands wrapped around the warm cup. Outside, the plaza wind carried faint music from a street violinist. When I caught my reflection in the window, my face was calm, lined, steady, and unshaken. For the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for her to come back. By spring, the desert had turned soft again. Tiny yellow blooms broke through the sand around my casita, and the mornings smelled faintly of rain on clay. I spent the first week of April repainting the front door a deep turquoise, the color of sky after a storm. When the paint dried, I screwed a small brass hook beside it, polished until it caught the sunlight. On a thin tag, I etched a single word. Home. 2 keys hung there. One for me, one for whoever might one day deserve to be let in. Delphine and Annika came for tea that afternoon, bringing honey biscuits and easy laughter. We sat under the shaded porch, the air full of sage and birdsong. Copper dozed at my feet, twitching in his sleep as if chasing something gentle. For the first time in years, conversation didn't feel like walking on glass. It simply flowed. Delphine talked about a painting class she wanted to start. Annika told us about a woman from the shelter who had just found her own apartment. Small victories. Ordinary joy. After they left, I tidied the cups and noticed an envelope slipped beneath my door. The handwriting was familiar. Hesitant. Inside. A single sheet, Mother. I started therapy 2 months ago. It's harder than I thought. I'm working part-time and learning to live differently. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you're well. V. I sat for a long time, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. The ache it brought wasn't sharp anymore, just distant. Like an echo through a canyon, I folded the paper and placed it in my journal. Between pages that no longer hurt to read, as evening fell, the wind lifted the curtains, carrying the smell of sage into the room. Copper stretched, sighed, and settled again by the door. I looked at the brass hook gleaming softly in the fading light and whispered to no one in particular. Love built me. Boundaries kept me standing.